Captain Daniel Hayes was drinking his morning coffee when the communication officer rushed onto the bridge. The young officer's face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he handed over the datapad. Daniel took it calmly, his years of experience teaching him that panic never helped anyone. What he read on the screen made him raise an eyebrow, but nothing more. The message was from the Galactic Council, the ancient organization that ruled most of the known galaxy. 17 different alien species belonged to the Council, and they had been in charge for over 3,000 years. They were powerful, respected, and very used to getting their way. The message they sent to Earth was not a polite request. It was a demand. Daniel read through the formal language and legal terms. When he stripped away all the fancy words, the message was simple. The Council wanted humanity to stop building warships immediately. They wanted Earth to destroy more than half of its current fleet. They were calling human ships dangerous weapons that threatened galactic peace. The Council demanded that Earth's leaders come to their headquarters on Zentar Prime within 1 month to discuss terms. The captain of the USS Valiant sat down his coffee and called Admiral Linda Brooks at Earth's Naval Command. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Admiral sitting at her desk in Geneva. She looked tired, which meant she had already received the same message and had been dealing with it for hours. "I assume you've read it," Linda said without greeting. Her voice was flat, controlled, but Daniel could hear the anger underneath. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied. "They want us to cut our fleet by 60%. They're saying our ships are too big and too heavily armed." Linda leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. Behind her, Daniel could see other officers moving around, all of them looking stressed and busy. Earth's military leadership had been thrown into chaos by the Council's ultimatum. "They've been watching us for the past 50 years, Linda explained. "Ever since we developed faster-than-light travel and started exploring outside our solar system. They didn't care when we were just poking around nearby stars. But now we've built real ships, and suddenly they're scared." Daniel understood the situation perfectly. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 3 centuries ago. They were the new species on the block, the ones who didn't know all the rules yet. The older alien races had expected humans to be grateful for their guidance, to follow the established protocols, and to build their military according to Council specifications. Humanity had done none of those things. "What's our response?" Daniel asked. Admiral Brooks smiled then, and it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made enemies nervous. "We're going to accept their invitation. I want you to take the Valiant to Zentara Prime. Bring the Ironside and the Sentinel with you. Let's show the Council exactly what they're dealing with." Over the next 2 weeks, Earth prepared for the meeting. The news spread across all human colonies and settlements. People had mixed reactions. Some were worried that humanity had pushed too far, too fast. Others were angry that aliens were telling Earth what to do. Most people were simply curious about what would happen next. Commander Jake Morrison worked 20-hour days at Naval Command, preparing briefing documents and tactical analysis. He was in charge of studying alien military capabilities, and his reports made interesting reading. The Galactic Council maintained a peacekeeping fleet of about 200 ships. Their largest vessel, a dreadnought called the Eternal Light, massed 40,000 tons and carried a crew of 300. Jake pulled up a comparison chart and showed it to Admiral Brooks during one of their planning sessions. The human ships looked absurdly large next to the Council vessels. The USS Valiant alone massed 300,000 tons. It carried a crew of 2,000 plus 500 Marines. Its weapon systems could destroy a small moon if needed. "They think we're building an invasion fleet," Jake said, shaking his head in disbelief. "They've sent us 16 different messages asking why we need ships this large. They don't understand our design philosophy at all." Linda studied the comparison charts with a thoughtful expression. "They've had peace for 3,000 years. Their ships are built for precision operations, police actions, and showing the flag. They've never had to prepare for a real war." "We have," Jake finished. "Every day of our existence," Linda agreed. "Earth's history is written in blood. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we finally unified. We know what war costs. We know what happens to species that can't defend themselves. The Admiral made her decision then. She would not go to Zentara Prime herself. Instead, she would send Captain Hayes and his ships as Earth's representatives. The Valiant would show the Council what human engineering could accomplish. If the aliens wanted to inspect human vessels, they could look all they wanted. Earth had nothing to hide. Daniel spent the final week before departure making sure his ship was in perfect condition. The Valiant was only 3 years old, one of the newest ships in Earth's fleet. Its armor was polished until it gleamed. Its weapons systems had been tested and retested. The crew drilled constantly, preparing for any situation. Lieutenant Amy Carter, the ship's weapons officer, ran her teams through simulation after simulation. She was a short woman with bright red hair and a fierce dedication to her job. Under her command, the Valiant's weapons crews could fire, reload, and fire again in under 90 seconds. Their accuracy ratings were the best in the fleet. Colonel Steve Bennett commanded the Marine detachment aboard the Valiant. His soldiers trained in the ship's massive gym, practiced room-clearing exercises, and maintained their equipment with obsessive care. Steve was a veteran of the border wars, conflicts that had erupted when humanity first encountered hostile aliens in the outer colonies. He knew that Marines might be needed at any moment, even on what was supposed to be a diplomatic mission. The day before departure, Admiral Brooks sent Daniel a private message. Her hologram appeared in his quarters late at night, when most of the crew was sleeping. "Daniel, I want you to understand something," she said quietly. "This meeting is going to change everything. The Council has been running the galaxy their way for thousands of years. They're not going to like what they see when they inspect your ship." "I understand, ma'am," Daniel replied. "Do you?" Linda asked. "Because once they see what we've built, there's no going back. They'll either accept us as equals, or they'll see us as a threat. We need to be ready for both possibilities." Daniel nodded slowly. He had already considered this. The moment the Council inspectors walked through the Valiant's corridors and saw its weapons, its armor, its fusion reactors, everything would change. The aliens would realize that humanity was not going to follow their rules. Earth had built ships according to human needs, using human logic. Following human military doctrine, the Galactic Council was about to learn that humanity did not ask permission to defend itself. The next morning, the USS Valiant departed from Earth orbit, flanked by its sister ships. 3 massive cruisers accelerated away from humanity's homeworld, their fusion drives burning bright against the black of space. Inside the ships, thousands of men and women prepared for the mission ahead. They checked weapons, reviewed protocols, and waited to see how the ancient alien Council would react to humanity's presence. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on his bridge and watched. Earth shrank in the view screen. Somewhere on that blue planet, Admiral Brooks was watching too, hoping that her gamble would pay off. Humanity was about to challenge 3,000 years of galactic tradition. The Council had summoned Earth to answer for its ships. They were going to get more answers than they expected. The journey to Zentara Prime took 3 weeks. The human ships traveled through jump points, the natural shortcuts in space that allowed faster-than-light travel. During the journey, Captain Daniel Hayes kept his crew sharp with constant drills and exercises. He knew that first impressions mattered, and he wanted the Council to see a professional. Disciplined military force. When the 3 human ships finally arrived at Zentara Prime, the view took everyone's breath away. The planet was beautiful, covered in purple oceans and green continents. Massive orbital stations surrounded it like a necklace of metal and lights. Hundreds of ships moved between the stations, representing dozens of different alien species. It was the heart of galactic civilization, and it had stood for thousands of years. The USS Valiant took up position in high orbit, with the Ironside and Sentinel forming a defensive triangle around it. Even at rest, the human ships looked dangerous. Their dark gray armor absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Their weapon ports were clearly visible. Anyone who looked at them could tell these were not merchant vessels or exploration ships. These were warships built for combat. Within an hour of arrival, Daniel received a message from the Council. High Arbiter Zelnith, leader of the inspection team, requested permission to come aboard. Daniel granted it immediately. He wanted the aliens to see everything. Earth had nothing to hide. The transport ship that brought the inspection team was small and elegant, typical of Council design. It docked with the Valiant's port airlock, and Daniel waited in the docking bay with full honors. Marines in dress uniforms stood at attention. Officers wore their best uniform. RMS everything was polished and perfect. High Arbiter Zelnith was the first to step off the transport. He was tall, maybe 7 feet, with golden scales covering his body. His species, the Corvani, were one of the founding members of the Galactic Concul. They had been exploring space for over 5,000 years. Zelnith moved with the confidence of someone who had inspected hundreds of ships and knew exactly what to look for. Behind him came 4 other aliens. They carried scanning equipment and data pads. Their eyes darted around the docking bay, taking in every detail. Daniel noticed them staring at the Marines, at their weapons, at the heavy armor plating visible through open maintenance panels. "Captain Hayes," Zelnith said, his translator device rendering his clicks and hisses into perfect English. "Thank you for receiving us. The Council has authorized a full inspection of your vessel. We will examine all systems to ensure compliance with Galactic Standard Armament Protocols." Daniel smiled politely. "You're welcome to inspect whatever you'd like, Arbiter. Lieutenant Amy Carter will escort your team and answer any questions you have." Amy stepped forward and saluted. She had been chosen for this duty because of her perfect knowledge of the ship's systems and her ability to stay calm under pressure. The inspection team followed her out of the docking bay, and Daniel watched them go with a small smile. This was going to be interesting. The inspection started in the reactor section, deep in the heart of the ship. Amy led the aliens through secure corridors, past damage control stations, through blast doors designed to contain explosions. Everything they saw was bigger and heavier than what they were used to. The corridors were wider. The walls were thicker. The whole ship felt solid and powerful. When they reached Reactor Bay 3, one of the alien specialists, a creature named Pelthar, stopped walking and just stared. The fusion reactor was massive, a cylinder of metal and magnetics that rose 3 decks high. Coolant pipes as wide as a man ran in all directions. The power output displays showed numbers that seemed impossible. "This is your main reactor?" Pelthar asked, his voice translator struggling to convey his shock. Amy shook her head. "This is Reactor 3. We have 6 fusion reactors total. Each one produces about the same output." Zelnith made a sound that the translator couldn't process. He walked around the reactor, studying it from all angles, checking his scanning equipment repeatedly. "This single reactor produces more energy than our entire battle fleet combined," he finally said. "We need the power for the weapon systems and the shields," Amy explained calmly. "Also for the magnetic drives and the life support. The Valiant is designed for long-duration missions, far from support. We need redundancy in everything." The inspection team spent 2 hours in the reactor section documenting everything they saw. Then Amy led them to the weapons bay. That's when things got really interesting. The main weapons bay was enormous, taking up 3 entire decks. Rows of magnetic acceleration cannons lined the walls, each one 50 meters long. Ammunition storage containers held thousands of rounds. Automated loading systems moved constantly, running diagnostic checks. Everything was clean, maintained, ready for instant use. Zelnith stood in the center of the bay and slowly turned in a circle, trying to take it all in. "Explain these weapons," he demanded, pointing at the closest cannon. Amy walked over and patted the massive barrel. "These are MAC guns. Magnetic acceleration cannons. They use magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to very high speeds. This particular model fires a 500-kilogram slug of depleted uranium." "At what velocity?" asked another alien inspector. "0.03 light speed," Amy replied. 3% of the speed of light. When it hits something, the kinetic energy is enough to punch through most armor and continue on through the other side. The aliens consulted their data pads, running calculations. Zelnoth's scales had turned a darker color, which Amy had learned meant he was upset or frightened. "These weapons are far beyond Council limitations. A single shot could destroy one of our cruisers completely." "That's the idea," Amy agreed. "We build weapons that work. What good is a gun that can't hurt your enemy? The inspection continued for hours. The team examined the missile batteries, which could launch 100 missiles in 30 seconds. They studied the point defense systems, which used lasers to shoot down incoming threats. They measured the armor plating and were shocked to find it was meters thick in some places. Not the centimeters they were used to, but the real shock came when Amy took them to meet the Marines. Colonel Steve Bennett was running training exercises when the inspection team arrived. His soldiers were practicing room-clearing techniques in the ship's combat simulation area. They wore full combat armor, carried heavy weapons, and moved with practiced efficiency. The exercise involved storming a hostile ship. The Marines executed it perfectly. Zelneth watched the exercise with growing alarm. "Why do you have soldiers on a warship?" he asked. "This is not a troop transport." Steve looked at the alien like he was crazy. "Every warship carries Marines Arbiter. We need them for boarding actions, for defending against borders, for ground operations, for security. A ship without Marines is just a target." "Boarding actions?" Zelneth repeated. "You plan to board enemy vessels?" "If necessary," Steve confirmed. "Sometimes you need to capture a ship intact. Sometimes you need to rescue hostages. Sometimes you need to eliminate a threat without destroying valuable intelligence. Marines give us options." Inspection teams spent another hour with the Marines, documenting their weapons, their armor, their training. Everything they saw was designed for war. Real war, not the polite conflicts the Council was used to. These humans trained to fight in space, on planets, in cities, in wilderness. They prepared for every situation, every possibility. By the time the inspection ended, Zelneth looked exhausted. His team had documented everything, but the numbers seemed unbelievable. The USS Valiant carried more firepower than the Council's 10 largest ships combined. Its armor could withstand hits that would destroy any Council vessel. Its reactors produced enough power to run a small city. And this was just one ship. The humans had sent 3 identical vessels. Daniel met with Zelneth in the captain's quarters before the aliens departed. He offered the Arbiter a drink, which was politely refused. Zelneth sat down heavily, his scales still showing stress colors. "Captain Hayes, I must be honest with you," Zelneth said quietly. "I came here expecting to find violations of Council protocols. I expected to find weapons that exceeded our guidelines by small margins. I thought you would argue about percentages and technical specifications, and instead," Daniel prompted. "Instead, I find a ship that ignores our guidelines completely," Zelneth continued. "Your vessel is not designed to Council standards. It is designed according to some other philosophy entirely. Everything about it is excessive, overwhelming, beyond what we consider reasonable." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right. We didn't design our ships according to Council standards. We designed them according to human standards. And our standards are different because our history is different." "I will report my findings to the Council," Zelneth said, standing up. "But I must warn you, Captain. What I have seen here today will terrify them. The Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years by ensuring that no one species has overwhelming military advantage. Your ships upset that balance completely." "I understand," Daniel replied. "But the Council should also understand something. We didn't build these ships to threaten anyone. We built them to protect ourselves and our colonies. The galaxy is a big place, Arbiter. Not everyone out here is friendly." Zelneth departed shortly after, and Daniel watched the alien transport ship fly back toward the planet. He knew that within hours, the Council would receive Zelnoth's report, and then things would get very interesting indeed. Lieutenant Amy Carter joined Daniel on the bridge. They watched Zentara Prime together. "Do you think they'll try to force us to disarm?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "They can try, but I don't think it will work out the way they expect." The Galactic Council met in emergency session 2 days after the inspection. Their grand chamber was a massive dome that could hold thousands of representatives from all member species. The architecture was ancient and beautiful. It's built by civilizations that had mastered space travel when humans were still hunting with stone tools. Today, that ancient chamber buzzed with fear and anger. High Counselor Mevroth floated at the center of the chamber. He was a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell representing the Fedri species. His kind had founded the Council 3,000 years ago, establishing the rules that governed galactic civilization. Mevrath had seen many crises in his long life, but nothing quite like this. The holographic display in the chamber showed images from Zelnoth's inspection. Human weapons, human armor, human reactors. The numbers appeared beside each image, and those numbers made experienced military officers shake their heads in disbelief. Every species present had ships in orbit around Zentara Prime. All of them suddenly felt very vulnerable. Admiral Linda Brooks attended the session through holographic projection from Earth. Her image stood calmly in the designated human section, watching the aliens argue among themselves. She had expected fear. She had expected anger. What she hadn't expected was the sheer panic in some of the representatives' voices. "To order," Mevrath called out, his translated voice booming through the chamber. "We will conduct this session according to proper protocol. High Arbiter Zelnoth will present his findings, and then we will hear from the human representative." Zelnoth stepped forward, still showing stress colors in his scales. He had not slept since returning from the Valiant. The responsibility of his report weighed heavily on him. "Honored Council members, I have inspected the human vessel, USS Valiant, as directed. What I found exceeds our worst concerns." The holographic displays changed, showing technical specifications. Zelnoth explained each system in detail, his voice steady, despite his obvious distress. The weapon systems that could destroy continents, the armor that measured in meters, the reactors that produced impossible amounts of power, the Marines trained for boarding and ground assault. This vessel alone could defeat our entire peacekeeping fleet, Zelnoth concluded, and the humans have sent 3 identical ships. According to their own statements, they have dozens more. Their military capability exceeds the combined forces of the Council by a significant margin. The chamber exploded with noise. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate action. Others called for sanctions. A few suggested preemptive strikes before humanity could grow even stronger. Mevrath had to call for order repeatedly before the chaos settled. Representative Quelix of the Theros Collective spoke next. His species were warriors by tradition, proud of their military heritage. But even Quelix looked nervous. The human vessels represent an existential threat to galactic peace. They have built a war fleet under the guise of exploration ships. We must demand immediate disarmament, or face the consequences. Others agreed. The debate went on for hours, with speaker after speaker condemning human military buildup. Some suggested blockades. Others proposed economic sanctions. A few nervous representatives suggested maybe talking to the humans first. But they were shouted down by the majority. Finally, Mevrath turned to Admiral Brooks. "The Council has heard the evidence, Admiral. Now we will hear your explanation. Why has humanity built such excessive military forces? What are your intentions?" Linda's hologram smiled, and that smile made several representatives uncomfortable. She looked too calm, too confident. Someone facing accusations from the most powerful organization in the galaxy should look worried. Linda Brooks looked amused. "Honored Council members," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human military doctrine and capabilities. High Arbiter Zelnoth performed his inspection thoroughly and accurately. Everything he reported is correct. However, he inspected the wrong ships." Silence fell over the chamber. Mevrath's crystalline form pulsed with confused colors. "Explain yourself, Admiral. What do you mean the wrong ships?" Linda gestured, and new holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber. The Valiant-class vessels are our exploration and patrol cruisers. They are designed for long-range, independent operations in potentially hostile territory. They are heavily armed because they might encounter unknown threats far from support. They carry Marines because ground operations are sometimes necessary. Their armor is thick because we cannot always count on rescue. These ships are built to survive on their own." She paused, letting that sink in. Then the new displays expanded, showing different ships. Bigger ships. More heavily armed ships. Ships that made the Valiant look small by comparison. These are warships, Linda continued. The Vengeance-class battleships, the Titan-class carriers, the Omega-class siege dreadnoughts. We haven't brought any to Council space because, frankly, we saw no need for them. The specifications that appeared made representatives gasp. The Vengeance class measured 1 kilometer in length and massed over 2 million tons. The Titan class were even larger, designed to carry fighter wings and assault forces. But the Omega-class dreadnoughts were the real monsters. 2.5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons batteries, carrying enough firepower to bombard planets from orbit, the chamber erupted again, but this time with pure terror. Representatives who had been demanding human disarmament now looked like they were reconsidering that position. If the Valiant was just a patrol cruiser, what would happen if humanity actually sent its real warships? Zelneth had gone completely still, his scales showing colors that his species displayed only in the face of mortal danger. Why? He managed to ask. Why would any peaceful species build such monstrosities? Linda's expression grew serious. Because humanity learned a hard lesson in our history, Arbiter. We learned that hoping for peace, while being unprepared for war, is a recipe for extinction. We build these ships so we'll never need to use them. Mevrath floated forward, his energy form pulsing rapidly. You expect us to believe that you built the most powerful military force in the known galaxy, purely for defense? That you have no intentions of conquest or expansion? I expect you to look at human history, Linda replied. Yes, we fought wars. We fought them for 10,000 years. We know what war costs. We know what it does to civilizations. When we finally unified Earth and reached for the stars, we made a decision. We would never again be caught unprepared. We would never again be vulnerable to those who wish us harm. She gestured at the displays again. Every weapon system you see exists because of lessons we learned the hard way. We built heavy armor because we learned that shields can fail. We built redundant reactors because we learned that damage control matters. We built Marines into our ships because we learned that space battles are not the end of conflicts. Each piece of our military doctrine is written in blood and hard experience. Representative Quellick stood up. You speak of defense, but you have built an empire's military. What happens when humanity decides it wants to rule the galaxy? Linda turned to face him directly. Then you should count yourself lucky that you found out about our military strength now, while we're still willing to talk. Because if we wanted to conquer the galaxy, Quellicks, we would have done it already. We have the ships. We have the weapons. We have the training. What we don't have is the desire. The chamber fell silent again. It was a bold statement, but no one could argue with it. If humanity really wanted war, they could have struck without warning. They could have conquered Council worlds before anyone knew what was happening. Instead, they had accepted the Council's invitation to talk. They had allowed inspections. They had been completely transparent about their capabilities. What do you want? Mevroth asked quietly. If not conquest, what is humanity's goal? Linda considered her answer carefully. We want to be left alone to defend our colonies and our people. We want fair trade and open communication with other species. We want to explore the galaxy and learn from those we meet. And yes, we want to maintain a military strong enough that no one ever thinks about testing us. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from a dozen species. The Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years by limiting military buildups. That's admirable. But your system only works if everyone agrees to follow the rules. What happens when someone doesn't? What happens when a species decides your treaties don't apply to them? It has never happened, Mevrath said, yet Linda corrected. It has never happened yet. But the galaxy is bigger than Council space. There are species out there you've never met. There are threats you've never faced. Your peace has existed in a bubble of mutual cooperation. Humanity exists in a different reality, one where we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Commander Jake Morrison, watching from Earth, pulled up star charts and threat assessments. He had been compiling intelligence on the regions beyond Council space, areas where the Ancient Alliance had never bothered to explore. What he found was concerning. Unknown fleets, unexplored systems, potential threats that the Council had ignored because they were comfortable in their safe bubble. Back in the Council chamber, the debate continued for hours. Some representatives wanted to expel humanity from consideration for membership. Others suggested accepting human military strength as a fact and working with it. A few forward-thinking ones proposed that maybe humanity's approach to defense had merit in a dangerous galaxy. Finally, after 6 hours of debate, Mevroth called for a vote. The question was simple. Would the Council accept humanity's military forces as they existed? Or would they demand disarmament as a condition of membership? The vote was close, but in the end, pragmatism won. The Council voted to accept humanity with exemptions from standard armament restrictions. It was a compromise that satisfied no one but prevented open conflict. Admiral Brooks accepted the decision with grace. The Council has shown wisdom today. Humanity looks forward to peaceful cooperation with all member species. As the session ended and the holographic projections faded, Zelnath approached the human section. He looked at Linda's fading image with something like respect. "You frightened us today, Admiral. But perhaps fear is not entirely a bad thing. We have been too comfortable for too long." Linda's image smiled one last time before disappearing. "Fear keeps you alert, Arbiter. Just remember that humanity is on your side." The Council meeting ended, but the real conversations were just beginning. Behind closed doors, away from formal sessions and official records, panic spread among the member species like a virus. Military commanders pulled up their defense plans and realized they were worthless against human ships. Political leaders tried to calculate what it would cost to build similar vessels and found the numbers impossible. Economic advisors warned that trying to match human military spending would bankrupt entire civilizations. The Council's system of peace, through limitation, had worked for 3,000 years because everyone played by the same rules. Every species agreed to caps on ship sizes, weapons, yields, and fleet numbers. The system was carefully balanced, maintained through treaties and mutual trust. No one species could dominate because everyone was kept roughly equal in military strength. Humanity had entered the Galactic stage following completely different rules. On the USS Valiant, Captain Daniel Hayes shared drinks with his senior officers while they waited for new orders. The ship's mess hall was quiet, most of the crew having gone to their quarters after a long day. Daniel sat with Lieutenant Amy Carter, Lieutenant Greg Palmer, the chief engineer, and Colonel Steve Bennett. They were all drinking coffee, Earth's gift to the galaxy that several alien species had already become addicted to. "Did you see their faces when Admiral Brooks showed them the Omega-class specs?" Greg laughed, shaking his head. "I thought that Zelnath guy was going to pass out right there in the chamber." Amy smiled but looked thoughtful. "They genuinely don't understand why we built ships like that. To them, it seems excessive, aggressive, unnecessarily provocative. They can't comprehend the mindset." "That's because they've had peace for 3,000 years, Daniel said quietly. "They've forgotten what war actually looks like. They've forgotten what it costs." Steve nodded, his expression serious. The colonel had seen combat during the border wars. The conflicts that erupted when humanity first encountered hostile aliens in the outer colonies. Pirates, raiders, and territorial disputes that had cost lives and taught hard lessons. Earth's history is different from theirs. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we finally unified. Every human alive knows that our ships represent lessons learned in blood. "That's exactly right," Daniel agreed. "Every weapon system on this ship exists because somewhere in human history, someone needed it and didn't have it. Every piece of armor represents a ship that was destroyed because its hull was too thin. Every redundant system is there because we learn that single points of failure get people killed." Greg leaned back in his chair. "The Council maintains peace through treaties. Everyone agrees not to build certain weapons, not to exceed certain limits. It's an honor system, basically. And it works because everyone has been honorable." "For now," Amy added. "But what happens when someone breaks the treaty? What happens when a species decides the rules don't apply to them anymore? The whole system collapses." Daniel stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at Centauri Prime below. The planet glowed with billions of lights, representing thousands of years of civilization and culture. It was beautiful, peaceful, a testament to what cooperation could achieve. They built their peace on trust, he said softly. We build ours on strength. Neither approach is wrong, but they come from different philosophies. The Council believes that limiting weapons prevents war. We believe that having superior weapons prevents anyone from starting a war with us. Back on Earth, Admiral Linda Brooks was having a similar conversation with her senior staff at Naval Command. Commander Jake Morrison had gathered intelligence from across Council space, monitoring reactions to the human ships. What he found was a mix of fear, resentment, and grudging respect. Several species are asking their military commanders if they could build similar vessels, Jake reported. The answer is universally no. The resource requirements alone would cripple their economies. To build ships like ours, you need heavy industry, massive shipyards, and a culture that prioritizes defense spending. Linda studied the reports with interest. What about the Corvani? They're one of the most advanced species in the Council. Their largest shipyard could maybe build something half the size of the Valiant, Jake replied, and it would take them 20 years. We built the Valiant in 3 years, and we have 5 more under construction right now. Admiral Brooks smiled slightly. Because we planned for this. When humanity developed faster than light travel 200 years ago, we knew we would eventually meet other species. We knew some of them might be hostile. So we spent 2 centuries building the infrastructure to defend ourselves. While the Council species assumed everyone would be peaceful, Jake finished. Because that was their experience, Linda said. You have to remember, most of these species developed spaceflight and immediately found the Council. They were welcomed into a peaceful organization with established rules. They never had to fight for their place in the galaxy. Humanity is different. We reached the stars on our own, explored on our own, and encountered threats on our own. We learned to rely on ourselves. In a private meeting room aboard a Council space station, High Arbiter Zelnith met with a small group of representatives who wanted to understand humanity better. These were the pragmatists, the ones who realized that fear and anger would not change the situation. If humanity was going to be part of the galactic community, the Council needed to understand what made them different. Elder Sarath of the Velkin Union spoke first. His species were philosophers and diplomats, known for their wisdom and patience. Help us understand, Arbiter. You spent time aboard the human ship. What did you learn about them? Zelnoth's scales had returned to normal colors, but his voice still carried tension. They are professional, disciplined, and completely confident in their capabilities. They do not boast or threaten. They simply present their strength as a matter of fact. But why such strength? Asked Commander Threx of the Corvani Defense Fleet. What do they fear that requires such overwhelming force? Everything, Zelnith replied, and that is what we fail to understand. They do not fear specific threats. They prepare for unknown threats. Every system on their ships is designed with the assumption that something unexpected will go wrong. They plan for the worst possible scenario and build accordingly. Sarath considered this. The Council prepares for known threats. We analyze, we calculate, we build what we need for specific situations. The humans prepare for unknown threats by building excessive capability for everything. Is it excessive if it works? Threx asked quietly. The question hung in the air. No one had an answer. Back on the Valiant, Daniel received a private communication request from Admiral Brooks. He took it in his ready room, away from the crew. Linda's hologram appeared, looking tired but satisfied. The Council has accepted us, Daniel. Not happily, but they've agreed to let us maintain our fleet as is. No disarmament demands, no restrictions. That's good news, ma'am, Daniel replied. What's the catch? Linda smiled. You know me too well. The catch is that we need to prove we're not a threat. The Council is terrified right now. They need to see that our ships are for defense, not conquest. How do we do that? By being exactly what we've always been, Linda said. Professional, helpful, and ready to defend those who need defending. Which brings me to why I'm calling. We have a situation developing. Daniel straightened in his chair. What kind of situation? Our deep space scouts have detected a large fleet moving through the outer reaches. Unknown configuration, heavily armed, heading in the general direction of Council space. They'll arrive in approximately 18 months. How large? Current estimates put it at over 300 vessels, Linda replied. We don't know who they are or what they want. But they're not broadcasting any identification signals, and they're not responding to hails. Daniel felt his combat instincts kick in. This was what human ships were built for. Unknown threats, potential danger, the need to be ready for anything. What are your orders, Admiral? I want you to investigate. Take your task force, find out who they are and what they want. If they're hostile, warn them away from Council space. If they won't listen, be prepared to stop them. The Council knows about this. They will in about an hour, Linda said. I'm briefing Mevereth personally. But Daniel, this is important. The Council has been at peace for 3,000 years. They've never faced a real external threat. If this unknown fleet is hostile, they won't know how to handle it. We need to show them that our military strength is an asset, not a threat. Daniel understood perfectly. This was humanity's chance to prove its worth. The Council had accepted human ships because they had no choice. Now humans needed to show why those ships were necessary. We'll handle it, ma'am, Daniel promised. After the call ended, Daniel sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what was coming. An unknown fleet, potentially hostile, heading toward the most peaceful civilization in the galaxy. The Council would panic. They would debate endlessly about proper responses and diplomatic protocols. Meanwhile, the threat would keep coming. But humanity would be ready. Human ships were built for this. Human crews trained for this. Human doctrine assumed that peace was temporary and threats were constant. The Valiant and its sister ships would go out into the dark, find the unknown fleet, and deal with it. Not because humans wanted war, but because they were prepared for it. That was the difference between humanity and the Council. The Council hoped for peace. Humanity prepared for war while hoping they would never need to use that. Preparation. The final session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days later. The Grand Chamber was packed with representatives from all member species, plus observers and military commanders who rarely attended political meetings. Everyone knew something important was about to happen. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. High Counselor Meveroth floated at his usual position in the center of the chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with controlled energy. Behind him, holographic displays showed star charts and fleet positions. The mood was somber, almost fearful. Admiral Linda Brooks attended again through holographic projection. This time she was not alone. Captain Daniel Hayes stood beside her, his image transmitted from the USS Valiant in orbit. Other human military officers were present as well, creating a small cluster of Earth's finest in the alien chamber. The Galactic Council recognizes Admiral Brooks, Meveroth announced formally. You requested this session? Please proceed. Linda stepped forward, her hologram moving smoothly through the chamber's projection field. Thank you, High Counselor. 3 weeks ago, human deep space scouts detected an unknown fleet in the outer reaches. We have been monitoring them since. Today, I am here to inform the Council of our findings and our recommended response. The star charts expanded, showing the galaxy with a red marker indicating the unknown fleet's position. They were far beyond Council space, in regions that had never been explored by the Ancient Alliance. The fleet was massive, over 300 ships. They were moving steadily toward known civilization. Representative Quelix stood up immediately. Why were we not informed of this threat immediately? The Council should have been notified the moment you detected them, because we needed to verify the threat first, Linda replied calmly. We did not want to cause unnecessary panic based on incomplete information. Now that we have confirmed the situation, we are informing you and offering our assistance. Zelnith, who had been sitting quietly, spoke up. What do you know about this fleet? Who are they? What do they want? Linda gestured, and new data appeared on the displays. We don't know who they are. They are not broadcasting identification signals. They do not respond to communication attempts. Our scouts have observed them from long range, and what we see is concerning. Their ships are heavily armed. Their formation is military in nature. They are not explorers or merchants. This is a war fleet. The chamber erupted with noise. Fear spread through the representatives like wildfire. Some species had legends of ancient invaders from beyond known space. Others worried about pirates or raiders on a massive scale. None of them had military forces capable of facing 300 warships. Outer, Mevrath called out. Admiral Brooks, what is your assessment of their intentions? Unknown, Linda admitted. They might be explorers who simply do not respond to our communication protocols. They might be refugees fleeing some disaster. Or they might be an invasion force. We cannot know until we make contact, which is why I am here. She paused, letting the tension build. Humanity is prepared to intercept this fleet and determine their intentions. Captain Hayes will lead a task force to investigate. If the unknown fleet is peaceful, we will welcome them. If they are hostile, we will turn them away from Council space. If they refuse to leave, we will stop them. The simplicity of that statement was stunning. While the Council debated and worried, humanity was ready to act. They would go out, face the unknown threat, and deal with it. No committees, no endless discussions, no diplomatic protocols. Just direct action. Elder Sarath stood slowly, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Admiral Brooks, you speak of stopping a fleet of 300 ships. Do you truly believe you have the capability to do this? Linda smiled. Elder Sorath, we have the capability to stop a fleet 10 times that size if necessary. Captain Hayes will take 5 exploration cruisers to battleships and supporting vessels. That force alone outguns the unknown fleet by a significant margin. If more force is needed, we can provide it. Daniel stepped forward, his hologram moving beside Admiral Brooks. The USS Valiant and our task force will depart within 12 hours. We will make contact with the unknown fleet, determine their intentions, and report back to both Earth and the Council. If they are peaceful, everyone benefits. If they are hostile, we will handle it. Zelnath stood and approached the human holograms. His scales showed colors that indicated deep thought and uncertainty. Captain Hayes, Admiral Brooks, I must ask you something that has been troubling me since I inspected your vessel. Please, Daniel invited. Your weapons? Your armor? Your entire military philosophy seems designed for overwhelming force and total victory. You build ships that can destroy planets. You train soldiers for boarding actions and ground assault. Everything about your military suggests you prepare for total war. And yet, you stand here offering to defend the Council from threats. Why? What do you gain from this? It was the question everyone wanted answered. The chamber fell silent, waiting for the human response. Linda looked at Zelnoth with something like respect. That is a very good question, Arbiter. Let me answer it by asking you one in return. Why do you think we built such powerful ships? Zelnoth hesitated. To conquer? To dominate? No, Linda said firmly. We built them so we would never have to use them. Every weapon system you saw on the Valiant exists as a deterrent. When potential enemies see our ships, they think twice about attacking us. When pirates see our patrols, they go elsewhere. Our strength prevents conflict, it does not cause it. She gestured at the star chart showing the unknown fleet. But sometimes strength is not enough to prevent conflict. Sometimes threats emerge that do not care about deterrence. When that happens, someone needs to be ready to fight. The Council has been blessed with peace for 3,000 years. You have not needed to maintain a strong military because there were no external threats. But that peace came with a cost. You forgot how to defend yourselves. Commander Jake Morrison, attending from Earth, pulled up historical data and began distributing it to the Council representatives. Information about the border wars, about human encounters with hostile aliens, about the lessons Earth had learned the hard way. Daniel continued where Admiral Brooks left off. Humanity has not been at peace for 3,000 years. We have been fighting for survival since we reached the stars. We encountered hostile species in our first decade of exploration. We lost colonies to raiders. We fought wars over territory and resources. Every defensive system on our ships represents something that killed humans before we learned to counter it. He pointed at the unknown fleet on the display. This is exactly the kind of threat we've prepared for. Unknown forces, potentially hostile, coming from regions we know nothing about. The Council's first instinct is to debate, to try diplomatic solutions, to hope for the best. Humanity's first instinct is to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. We will try diplomacy, but we will do it from a position of strength. Colonel Steve Bennett's hologram appeared beside Daniel. The Council is not ready for this threat. Your peacekeeping fleet is designed for policing actions, not military combat. Your diplomatic protocols assume everyone will be reasonable. Your entire system is built on the assumption that threats can be negotiated away. Maybe you're right. Maybe this unknown fleet will be friendly. But if you're wrong, people will die. The harsh truth of that statement silenced the chamber. Everyone present knew it was accurate. The Council's military was not designed for real war. Their ships were too light, their weapons too limited, their crews too inexperienced. They had maintained peace through diplomacy and treaties, not through strength. Humanity offered them an alternative. Let the humans investigate. Let the humans make contact. Let the humans take the risk. Mevrath floated in silence for a long moment, his crystalline form pulsing with complex colors. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of responsibility. The Council accepts humanity's offer. Captain Hayes, you are authorized to intercept and investigate the unknown fleet. You will report your findings to both Earth and the Council. If conflict becomes necessary, you are authorized to defend Council space. Daniel saluted formally. Understood, High Counselor. We will not let you down. As the session broke up, Zelnith requested one final meeting with Captain Hayes. They met in a private communication room, hologram to hologram, before the Valiant departed.
Captain.
I want to apologize, Zelnith said quietly. When I first boarded your ship, I was terrified. Your weapons, your armor, your entire philosophy of warfare seemed barbaric to someone raised in our peaceful civilization. I could not understand why anyone would build such destructive capability. And now? Now I understand something fundamental, Zelnith replied. You do not laugh at our challenge because you are warlike or aggressive. You laugh because you know something we forgot long ago. Peace is not the absence of the capacity for war. Peace is having the capacity for war and choosing not to use it. Daniel smiled. That is exactly right, Arbiter. Every weapon on the Valiant exists so we will not have to use it. Every armor plate is in place so we will not be tested. We are not looking for a fight, but we are ready for one if it comes. Always ready, Zelnith said softly. That is the human way. Always ready, Daniel confirmed. Within hours. The USS Valiant and its task force departed Zentara Prime. 7 massive human warships accelerated away from the peaceful heart of galactic civilization, heading toward the unknown threat in the outer reaches. Their crews were prepared, their weapons were armed, their systems were at peak readiness. The Council watched them go with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that someone was dealing with the threat. Fear about what it meant to rely on such overwhelming military power. Admiral Linda Brooks watched from Earth as her ships jumped too faster than light speeds and disappeared. Beside her, Commander Jake Morrison voiced what many were thinking. Do you think they finally understand us? Linda considered the question while watching the empty space where her fleet had been. I think they are starting to. They have lived with the luxury of peace for so long they forgot that someone has to be ready to defend it. Maybe that is humanity's role in the galaxy. Not as conquerors or warriors, but as the ones who remember that peace requires strength. She smiled then, the same amused expression she had worn when the Council first issued their challenge. Besides, it is hard not to laugh when someone threatens your warships without realizing they are looking at your taxicabs. Jake laughed at that, and across Earth's military command centers, the sentiment was shared. Humanity had not built its fleet to challenge the galaxy. They had built it because that is what survivors did. They prepared, they adapted, and they made sure that when challenges came, they were ready to laugh in the face of danger, not because they were fearless, but because they knew fear and had prepared for it anyway. The Galactic Council had challenged human warships and received a lesson in human nature. Humanity did not need to boast or threaten. Their ships spoke for themselves, and their philosophy was simple. Hope for peace, prepare for war, always be ready to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That was the human way, and the galaxy was just beginning to understand what that meant in the darkness between stars. The USS Valiant and its task force raced toward the unknown fleet. Whatever they found out there, whatever threats emerged from the void, humanity would face it the way they always had, with courage, with preparation, and with overwhelming force held in check until absolutely necessary. The Council could debate the morality of such power. The aliens could fear human military strength. But when the time came to face the unknown, everyone would be grateful that someone was ready. Humanity was ready. They were always ready, and they would not stop laughing at those who underestimated what that readiness meant.